seconds.
Good evening. Welcome to our men's group. We're happy to be back. It's been a few weeks, so thank you for joining us. As always, our Sunday night program is really focused on men, and the current topic is leadership. We're actually going through the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, author John Maxwell. So it's not that women, not that teenagers can't still benefit from the discussions that we're having, but those in the audience are men, and again, our conversation is focused on men themselves. Pastor Ethan will be joining me here shortly, our youth pastor here at Meriden Hills Baptist Church. Pastor John is on a trip taking some of our elementary age children to Bible camp in West Virginia, so he will not be with us today. Now, we're going to start off tonight with the next law of leadership, and that is the law of magnetism. Now, the law of magnetism is essentially you will attract the kind of people around you as you are. Basically, the old verbiage, birds of a feather flock together. You're going to find that the people that surround you are going to be very similar to the kind of person that you are yourself. Now, I'm a little torn in this law, Ethan. He states it pretty strongly. He does, in the chapter, claim that it is true. You will have people around you that aren't just like you. But then he kind of goes and said, but there will be similarities between you and the people around you, whether they're like you a lot or a little or barely at all. I'm not sure that I agree with the level that he takes this law. I'm not denying the truth. I do believe that you as a person are very likely going to attract similar people to you. If you love God, you are likely to attract people who love God. If you love music, you're likely to attract, and you actually mentioned that, people who love music. I get that. In my experience, I have found that there's a lot of people who come to our church that are really not like me at all. In a lot of ways, they're not like me. I think that really what we share is our love for God, our love for the Bible, but as far as goals outside of, our desire to further God's kingdom, as far as the way we do things, how we even handle leadership, it's not really very similar. I'm curious what you think about this law.
So I actually agree. I would never agree with anybody 100%, but I agree, and I think where the tension is probably eased for you would be the fact that you're going to attract people, more or less, who want the type of leadership qualities, the qualities that you have. So, for example, and then the other side of that too is what does your leadership represent? So, if your leadership represents that I want people to come and find healing, then you're going to attract people who are hurting because, this person's offering me relational healing, or this person is offering, there's a reason why pyramid schemes are a big thing, because the person usually on the front end of the pyramid scheme is offering, hey, I want to offer you financial success.
Right.
So obviously people who are wanting financial success, if you're not wise, then they're like, oh, okay, well then I will follow you in that. That's one way to take it. I also think about, though, on the other side of it, which is probably where you probably would strongly agree, is that this is more or less on the sides of, if you're looking at this from a business perspective or just organizational perspective, and who are you hiring? Well, the people you hire, you're going to attract the people that you want to hire, more or less.
I think that you said something. You stated that your leadership is what draws people to you. I totally agree with that. Mm-hmm. That people are going to want to work with you, for you, around you.
They can.
Because of the kind of person you are. But, let's also be honest. In the secular world, a lot of people end up working jobs for a lot of people they don't like, have nothing in common with. The only thing drawing them is the money. Right. So we have to have this conversation of there are other things that would draw someone to your realm of leadership
100%.
aside from your leadership.
Right.
Money being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think there are some people who, let's talk churches, because we're pastors, you and I,
Sure.
and we're in a church setting. What else would draw someone to Meriden Hills aside from my style of leadership?
Well,
I think there's plenty of things. What do you think it could be?
I honestly kind of want to sidestep the question, because I would just say that if you're not a healthy leader, then you're not going to hire healthy leaders, or you're not going to have them very long.
Are we talking about just hiring, though? Are we not talking about just drawing people to you, even on a volunteers, church members, friends, attenders, people who would just want to be around you?
Again, like, I would even go back to the idea of a healthy person is not going to stay in an unhealthy place very long.
Interesting. So I think,
leader or whatever.
In my experience, I think that there are some people who will, let's talk church again, who will attend a church where truth is being taught, and they recognize the truth is here, and although I'm not drawn to that person as a leader, I don't believe that there are very many similarities between us. I am drawn to the truth that is being taught here, more so what is here rather than who is here. I believe, and by the way, this is more true when there's less options. Like if there's 3 churches in a square mile, then obviously you can kind of choose a church based off of not only truth, but leadership philosophy. But if you're in an area where there are not many options and you've got a leader who you're like, but truth is not being taught there, and truth is being taught here, but the leadership isn't something you would relate to, someone who loves truth is going to go to the church that has truth.
Okay, but then that doesn't disagree with the law of magnetism, because in the law of magnetism would therefore state then, in the eyes of like a pastor, is like, hey, regardless of what the style of the message is or the style of the church and the presentation, if the pastor has made it abundantly clear that the truth, that Jesus Christ, the gospel, is a center point of everything that spills out, then you cannot you might not like the guy even. You might not like the fact that he adds too many quotes from devotionals or commentaries in his preaching, but he's all about the truth, and you can hear that when it comes out. So regardless of how he packages the truth, regardless of how the church presents itself, because that his focus, because that's one of the things I wrote down here is that to ensure that the right kind of magnetism is values. Well, people are attracted to values. If your value and that person's value is lined up with truth and loving people, then they'll go to that church regardless of how they present themselves.
I think that's well said. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's come to an agreement here. I think the law of magnetism is less of a personality thing
100%.
and more, at least for Christians, would be more of a values thing.
I would say, well, even further, for a healthy person in general, because even talking about the business world, sure, you have lots of guys going out there working for companies and they're pushing papers and we're working 9 to 5, but if you look at any company that there's a high rating, like a low turnover rate, high rating from internal, they always pretty much across the board, they take care of their employees. They do this. They're not perfect, but their employees know that from the top down, their leadership cares about them. Chick-fil-A is a great example of that, where for example, this kid might be doing I'm just prepping food or cleaning the lobby, but there's also from the top down, we care about people.
In fact, this chapter actually discusses that the tendency is to hire people who are like you.
Yes.
And I will say, John Maxwell did do a good job of saying, look, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. In fact, you kind of need to fight that tendency and recognize you've got to hire in your weaknesses, not just a bunch of people who are like you. Mm-hmm. In fact, he used the example of the NFL, that they were kind of forced to start hiring outside of their standard white male, certain age background, right? And they kind of had to look at minorities and bringing in other things. Whether you like it or not, the example was most people, if they're not forced, hire people like themselves. That was 100%. The point.
Yes.
I do think that that's a great thing to remember, that in the law of magnetism, whether it's true about people being drawn to your personality or not, which I'm not as convinced of that as I think John Maxwell states. I think that what you said is true. Yeah. I think there is a magnetism of values. People will be drawn to similar values that you have when they have those values. Now, John Maxwell may believe that. He just didn't state it clearly in his chapter if that was his point.
If that is his point, I would disagree with it.
All right, but I do think that it's very true that the law of magnetism for personality is true on the other side, that that is a fault of leaders. That we do tend to hire people that look like us, act like us, and think like us. And a lot of leaders are scared to surround themselves with diversity, whether it's racial diversity or thought diversity, emotional diversity, right? A man who's like, I would never cry, doesn't want to hire someone who's okay with crying, or a guy who's okay with, being a little more in tune with his feelings, doesn't want to hire a guy who's like, stone, right? So that is a truth, and I think that's unfortunate because I believe the best leadership team is diverse.
Yes.
In fact, when I look at ours, you and I, we have similar values. That's what I think. Back to what we said earlier, that's what draws us together as our values.
100%.
I don't know that we are very alike when it comes to personality and how we do things, and that isn't just okay. I think that's great. I think that's a healthy thing. Pastor John, similar values, but I don't know that Pastor John is a whole lot like you or a whole lot like me in many areas.
Yeah. I think the balance of in today's culture is just weird because we're like, obviously you want a level of diversity, but to me, I honestly I almost hate that word nowadays because diversity itself has become the value as opposed to values. Does it make sense? Like values being the value. But I think
the value is now, do you guys look different skin colors and sizes and ages
and
as opposed to
right?
Yeah,
as
what really
opposed to-
matters.
right? Like that's important because obviously that makes up a person, but at the same time, what to your point, 100% agreement. Like if the values line up, if you're looking for values and like aligning in that, then you'll find plenty of people who God will bring across your way, and like, yeah, you don't have to intentionally look. Okay, well, I have to make sure that for our for our staff, we have to hire someone who's of Asian descent or someone who's of African or South American. Like, if you have the right values, then someone of any culture, as long as you've opened yourself up to whatever opportunities are out there, then of course, obviously I'm here. So
that's true.
And one more thing to add to that.
Go ahead.
Our church, if you've been here I've only been here for like 5 years, but our church has slowly but surely shifted as far as like who's populating it. We're becoming a lot more like a mirror image of what our city looks like.
I would say that the diversity of this church does definitely match a very similar to the diversity of the town, which is how it should be.
Which is how it should be, and it wasn't.
But that wasn't intentional. We didn't force that to happen.
Exactly. We didn't care. We just said, hey, let's make sure who we are aligns with like what God wants us as a church to align with, and that just happened, which is great. That's a beautiful thing.
And what we didn't force to happen was only surrounding ourselves with people who look like us and think like us and feel like us.
Mm-hmm.
We made it as leaders of this church, you, myself, Pastor John, we made it an intention of the law of magnetism going back to values, which I just wish John Maxwell spoke more of that and less of like he talks about the attitude and the background and the generation. And he does have values. He does in 107 talk about values, but it's only a short section that he mentions values. It's not a whole lot.
To me, that's like arguably the most, aside from leadership ability.
On page 107, he talks about values.
107 values. I mean, it's like it's a solid paragraph, but
he almost could have had the whole chapter beyond that.
He honestly should have made, because that's honestly like when you think about teams like background, that's important, but generation, that's important, but values, super key.
So Amos chapter 3, verse 3, God is talking to the nation of Israel through the prophet Amos. And he says to the nation of Israel, can two walk together except they be agreed? God didn't care here about the diversity. God didn't care about the age of the Jews, and God didn't care about their gender. God says, what's your value? Where are you headed with your values? Are you heading towards me, towards truth, towards morality, or away from me? When he talks about can two walk together lest they be agreed, he is discussing values here, core, spiritual, religious values, you might say. You could tag that word on there. And so that's where I'm at. And I believe that as leaders, you will definitely attract people to you who have similar values as you. You have bad values in your life, you're probably going to find yourself surrounded by a bunch of people with bad values. You got good, solid values. Those whose values are opposite won't want to be around you because you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. You're going to make them feel offended. You're going to make them feel judged all the time. They're going to separate themselves. Those who have similar values are going to be comfortable. They're going to be encouraged. They're going to be energized by surrounding themselves with others of similar values. I think that the biggest danger in Christian circles, but really in all leadership circles, is when we ignore the magnetism of values and try to force the magnetism of appearance. And that was my biggest concern with this chapter, is that I almost feel like that was a major push when it should be a push away from that. Forget appearance. I don't care about appearance. Let's surround ourselves with people of similar values and not worry what we look like.
So, to your point, and this is one of the areas in this chapter where, like, I kind of disagree with pretty strongly with John Maxwell. Not that I'm, at his level, but I'm just saying I disagree with the way he approached it. He said there's a quote here that he put in the book in this chapter from a former head basketball coach at Marquette University. So Marquette, for those guys who aren't like sports fans, Marquette University has a pretty successful sports program, especially in basketball.
Yeah.
They were in, I think they made the Final Four at some point in the past like 10 years or whatever. So pretty successful basketball program. And he posted a quote from social media. He wrote a quote in there from a former head basketball coach at that university. A team should be an extension of the coach's personality. My teams were arrogant and obnoxious. And so what Maxwell further, like he kind of extrapolates further and says, okay, so have the personality that you want your people to have. Which we kind of agree with that. But at the same time, like, is that really what you want? Like, if you want to be a healthy leader, do you want people attracted to your personality?
I do not. That's what I'm trying to get at. That is what concerns me in this chapter.
Right. And again, it kind of goes back to, like, as much as, generations before, like, hey, like, model what, the type of person that you want. I was to say at the same time, like, you also have to recognize that, no, leaders are very fallible. And, like, your personality, some people just don't like it, and it can be easily destroyed. There's faults in personality. There's faults even in appearances. Like, some people, anyways.
The bigger issue, Ethan, is when we make personality or appearance the idol to attain or the goal to attain, we are inevitably shifting the goal. The goal needs to be Christ and values. Let's just keep going back to that, not personality and appearance.
Have you seen, because you've been in ministry for a while, have you seen any parents who that was their focus as a parent is, like, hey, follow my personality or, like, the appearance I want, and that be a healthy thing for the students? Because I've seen that in just my short time.
It's not, I don't know the conversations that parents have at home.
Sure.
I will tell you this, naturally, I see your son Nolan, and he naturally, like, acts like you to some degree and does things like you. A child is, to some level, at some age, is going to do it naturally. So we cannot assume parents are having conversations with their kids. Up to, like, 8, 9, or 10, the kids want to look like their dads. The girls want to look like their moms. It really is the teen years, which is what you're working with, is when a lot of times if the parents have made mistakes or turned their kids away from them, the kids will want to be the opposite of their parents. And now parents are almost belittling the children for not looking like the parents. It's not that these parents are saying, look like me to be great, look like me and do like me to be successful, but they are judging them and belittling them because they don't have the haircut like I have, or the clothes don't look like the clothes I wear. You don't wear the same brand or the same style clothing. You listen to different music. And so on the negative side, yes, I think a lot of parents, a lot of adults, teachers and students, same thing, right? A lot of adults are belittling the younger generation for not looking like them or having a similar personality.
I think that if there's anywhere that this kind of topic could go, it would be, honestly, that the best way where the rubber meets the road would be that direction, where I think a lot of parents don't recognize and don't admit to or recognize the fact that you've never been a parent of a teenager before, but now you are. And so what should be the thing that they really push to their kids, which is values, that's hard. Pushing values is hard because it's...
You got to have them first to push them.
You got to have them, and it does start young.
Yes.
And, because obviously if you're at that point where they don't get your values and then something happened, there's some sort of disconnect there. So what's easier than pushing, than training up a child in values? Well, it's like, hey, why can't you be like that person? Or, hey, just do what I do. Or, hey, when I was a kid, here's what I did. And it becomes, honestly, a cult. It can be, the idol of personality or the idol of image, where, like, you're just getting your kid to copy somebody else because you, as yourself, like, you haven't thought about, wow, if I just push my kid towards these values, then they'll become the child,
the best version of themselves.
Best version of themselves. Whereas, anyway, I'm gonna wrap it.
So here's where we're at. The law of magnetism is basically stating people are going to be attracted to you. Yeah. And here's where I kind of want to wrap things up now. We're kind of coming to the end of our talk. Yeah. It is true that leaders are going to attract. That's not deniable. There's obviously truth there. My concern is what do today's 21st century leaders, what do they use as the magnet? That's where I'm concerned. I was also concerned that I don't think John C. Maxwell took advantage of this law to discuss this conversation. Not that he's wrong, that there is a law of magnetism, but that I don't believe the most effective law of magnetism is in many of the things he mentioned. Giftedness, or personality, or appearance, or age, or race. Can you use those things and make them the magnet? Yes, we see it all the time.
Sure.
And are people attracted to those things when they are set up as the magnet? Yes, those people who think race is the most important will be attracted to leaders who make race the most important thing. Those people who think personality is the most important thing will be attracted to leaders who make personality the most important thing. I get that. You can go on about all these things, right? So the real question is, as men, if this law is true, and I believe it is, then what do we use as the magnet in our lives? As pastors of this church, as leaders, as men in our families, what are we using as the law of magnetism for us? I want it to be for me, my, first of all, love for Christ, my desire to follow him, and you could put all these under my values. Why I'm alive, who I'm living for, where I'm headed, all these things, my values. That's what I want to be the magnet for my leadership. I don't care about my personality. And not only do I not necessarily want people to follow me because of my personality, I'm actually concerned when that is the reason.
It's disturbing.
That actually bothers me on many levels. Yeah. If they're following me for my personality only, then they're kind of setting me up above the values that I'm living for, and then I've either made a mistake or they've made a mistake. Possibly both of us have made a mistake. I understand you'll want to be around people that you're comfortable with. I get that. Sure. But you know what? There's a value to being uncomfortable with someone who you don't think alike, look alike, act alike, but you both have the same values. I'd rather have that 100%. Than someone who looks like me, thinks the same way I think, that we process information the same way, we act the same way, but our values are different.
Well, that becomes an echo chamber.
It's an echo chamber, but an echo chamber of things that don't matter. Exactly. Because the values are what matters.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what is our magnet as men? And if you are finding yourself surrounded by people with the same personality, you know what your magnet is. If you find yourself surrounded by people who all look like you, same skin color, same race, same dress, they dress the same way, then you know what your magnet is. If you find that everyone around you listens to the same music or whatever, and that's your priority, you know what your magnet is. Mm-hmm. If you find people who have the same values, you know what your magnet is.
Yep.
I am concerned when throughout my years, I don't visit many churches now, being a lead pastor of one. I don't go around visiting churches. When I was younger, I was concerned when I walked into churches and everyone looked the same. And I don't just mean, racial appearance. I mean, they dressed the same. Like they all shopped at the same place. They all shopped at the same place. So that kind of tells you right there what this church is setting up as a magnet.
Correct.
It is appearance.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Ethan?
Yeah. Give me like 5 seconds. All right. I'm gonna have some thoughts, but I'm gonna make it really brief. So, first of all, there's a famous saying out there, and it's very true. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's like general like psychology research.
So make one of them Jesus.
No, seriously. So you're the sum of, on average, most people are the sum of the 5 people they spend the most time with. Okay. Second, here's a couple of Bible verses for you. He that walks with wise men or lives with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Again, in Proverbs, for by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Again, in Proverbs, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. In closing, something that's missed by the church is this idea of having counselors and or, I would even argue, for mentors/coaches. Case in point, I was actually at an event. I can't remember how long ago. It was this past summer. Hi, Tinino. Tinino was there. It was a Chick-fil-A event, and I got to sit down for like 10 minutes with the CFO of Chick-fil-A, Mark Cathy. It was amazing. And one of the questions I had some questions I wanted to ask him. So one of the questions I asked him was, "Hey, you're a successful guy, obviously. Cool. So question: do you have like mentors or like coaches?" He's like, "Yeah, I have a few of them for like different areas of my life." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And this is a guy who's like up there and has like gone through the the chain of command to be able to get to that point. Like, okay. Here's another question. Is that something that's like pretty standard across the board? It's like, absolutely. If you want to be a successful leader, I don't care how smart or how experienced or how seasoned you are, everyone needs coaches and mentors, no matter how seasoned you are. And that got me thinking, because in professional sports, it's like you have one coach in high school, and the higher you go up in the ranks, the more coaches you have for the different skill sets you need in your life. Okay, so fast forward to like me looking in the church saying, okay, why is this not a standard in the church for us to encourage men, which is what we're doing tonight, to encourage men, hey, like, God's gifted you, so not only should you be trying to influence your family, but you should be allowing yourself to be influenced by other great men of God. You should be trying to influence other men in your church to, okay, so then what does that all tie into? Okay, this law of magnetism is, if there's no other chapter out of this book that could be more like rubber meets the road for the church, it's this. Like, each of us in this room needs to be obviously influenced by God, but we also we need to be influenced by godly men who are in an area maybe where we're not yet. We need to influence, be able to be that person for our wives, for our close friends, for our children, because everyone's going to be attracted to something. And it's kind of on us as the men that God has placed in authority over our families and, you know, who have leadership within the church to be like, okay, I don't want people to be attracted to me, but how many opportunities am I giving people around you to be attracted to the values that are most important to me? So that's kind of I know it's kind of a lot, but that's kind of my final thought is, like, this is super key for the church, and it's the reason why, like, if there's any group of people that should be harping on this, it should be our group here, where we're like, hey, we are like the influencers that literally, like, there's a reason why God gives such a high role to men in the church. It's because of this is one of the reasons. Like, we are the influencers. So take it seriously.
I'd like to end with this. There is you limit yourself when you become the magnet. You are limited to the kind of people you can draw to you. That's just a matter of fact. Your values are the, I think, best option you've got at drawing the most diverse amount of people, because it's values and nothing else gets in the way. But if it's anything outside of values, you are going to have to be willing to have a smaller crowd of people. There is only one person who in and of themselves attracts all of the people, and that's Christ. Yes. Look at Christ. And when Christ walked this earth, he had 12 men following him. One was a traitor, right?
Yep.
All very different guys, very diverse in their backgrounds, in their experiences, in their career choices, in their personalities. Mm-hmm. All of them were attracted to Christ. I can tell you right now, if I was alive 2,000 years ago and I was gathering those 12 men, they would not all 12 be attracted to following me. I can tell you that for sure, right? Maybe one or two because of personality similarities. Again, outside of values, I would be narrowed down from 12 to maybe 2 or 3, if that, right? Christ attracts them all. Mm-hmm. The law of magnetism, as a leader, needs to be focused on what is most important, values. But also remember, Christ can attract way more people than you ever could. So stop making it about you, make it about Christ, and let Christ draw people to him, which is what he does very, very well. And you just be there, ready to serve them once they've been drawn to Christ.
That's good.
As spiritual leaders, we cannot make the church, the ministry, about us. We limit the amount and the type of people that will be impacted to those who are attracted to us. When we make the ministry about Christ, now we got a twofold victory. Mm-hmm. Now we've made it about values, and if it's about a person, the person of Christ, which attracts all other types of people. Yeah. So when you're working with people, make it about Christ, make it about your values, and the law of magnetism will be played out towards success in your ministry. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be together again next Sunday. We actually had a couple of weeks off due to some traveling, and we had a outreach program last Sunday in the Green, and so we didn't have a Sunday service last Sunday. So we will be back, though, next Sunday night. Going to be looking at the law of connection, and that's the idea that leaders will touch a heart before they ask for a hand. The core philosophy of leadership being, I'm not connecting with you for what I can get out of you. I'm connecting with you because of how I want to help you and how I want to connect with you and be a help to you. And then once I've done that, would you like to be part of a bigger team? Do you like to be part of something bigger than yourself? But true leaders, good leaders, healthy leaders don't meet you to recruit you to a task. They meet you to help you. And so we'll talk more about that next Sunday night. Thank you so much for joining us.